Here we are on Good Friday. It does seem like one of those days where we have a lot of strange phrases. How is today Good Friday? I remember one of my professors commenting that it's the day that we celebrate the death of Christ, which is also an odd phrase, isn't it? It's one of those days that is good. It is good news for us, but it is a painful part of the story. If we back up just a little bit and pick up from last Sunday, we understand that Jesus is outside of the city, and in the middle of the night, police and soldiers go out to arrest him. One of the other accounts says that an entire cohort, 300 soldiers, went out to get him in the middle of the night, which makes us think it probably wasn't Jesus and his 12 disciples in the middle of a Bible study. We hear in tonight's text that Peter himself is armed, probably not the only one in the crowd. But the soldiers don't arrest him during the day when he was in the city and right there because they were afraid. So they snuck out in quiet and in secret at night to subdue him. And they drag him in. You would think somebody maybe who was being arrested would be taken down to the police station or something. But we get this very awkward and strange phrase. He was taken to Annas' house. Oh, sure, Annas. Caiaphas' father. Right, Caiaphas, who's the high priest. Of course, you would take him to the high priest's dad's house, is where you would take prisoners that you arrested in the dark of night. It's a bit of a kangaroo court kind of situation, and we have people that are uncertain of their power and afraid of Jesus' power. Afraid of it quite a bit. And in fact, as the night wanes and moves into morning, and they have gone on, and Jesus has been struck and questioned and put in his place, this horrible night comes to a conclusion when they drag him to see Pilate, the crack of dawn. And we have to imagine that this was not how Pilate wanted to start his day. Pilate had a reputation for being rather ruthless in keeping the peace. He could be very brutal, but his job was to keep things even, to keep things quiet in that corner of the Roman Empire. And Jesus, who was very popular, who was throwing the city and the countryside into upheaval, was being dragged to him for him to make some kind of judgment, and he didn't want to go any which way. Yet he was being pushed, he was being forced. And Jesus wasn't helping the situation. Are you a king? You say that I am. Jesus was, we might say today, providing his own defense. But all of this backroom maneuvering, the powers that are threatened, and the rules that get bent or broken to make those things happen are not unique to the Gospels. We think of them throughout history. Over the last year or so, I get a daily email from the Equal Justice Initiative that's headed up by Brian Stevenson. Many of you are aware of his book, Just Mercy, that was made into a movie about those suffering on death row unjustly. There are all kinds of stories that I get in this daily email, but many of them involve lynchings, which involve trees, not unlike we have in the story, or the hymns at least, today. And when we hear these stories of lynchings, which curiously didn't come up a lot in my history classes growing up in the 1970s in suburban Chicago, but as I read them now, it's curious to me how often they start out with a man who is in jail. He's already been apprehended by the local authorities, but somehow a crowd gets him out and lynches him. Some collusion. Or we think of other aspects of brutal force and power by authorities. We can't help but think of the trial at the death of George Floyd going on in the Twin Cities. We think of all kinds of time throughout history where authority has been twisted and violence has been done to preserve power. Right? That's the situation that we have going on here. There is great fear about Jesus, about what he might do. And when Pilate pushes him and says, "Who are you?" and he said this, "I have come for this, to testify to the truth." Testify. Pilate says, what is truth? Right? Curiously, way before the post-truth era even, right? What is truth? And what does it mean to testify to it? The Greek word most often used for testify or witness is the word martyria. It's the word in English today that we use as martyr. Someone who testifies or is a witness to something in the very giving of their life. We might look at the crucifixion of Jesus as a witness to truth. And if we were to ask ourselves, well, what is this truth? It is a truth that God is love, and that perhaps as powerfully, God is life. Life. Everywhere you see it being fought for in hospital beds and all over the place, anywhere you see it bursting out even when you don't want to see it. Life is the force of God in this world. Life. As we take a step back from the story of Jesus in the narrative that we have from the Gospel of John and place it in the context of Good Friday, it's important to remember we're in the middle of a liturgy right now. This is the middle section of it. We are in one service that begins on Maundy Thursday and will go through even to Easter evening, as we count the great 3 days, the Triduum, from evening to evening to evening. This is the great arc of a single story. Without Easter, Good Friday is simply another terribly common story of human tragedy, pain, and death. But without Good Friday, there can be no Easter. Without Good Friday, Easter is only jelly beans and marshmallows. It is not a story and force for life in our own lives, but becomes something just of sugar. When we think of this story, this arc that Christ experienced and that we move through every year, we are reminded powerfully in this truth of God that is love and life, that Jesus died and rose from the dead. The fact that we are gathering this evening, 2,000 years and thousands upon thousands of miles away from the events that were recorded, that were read this evening, says that something unique and powerful happened in human history that has never been experienced before or after. Something about life and love that was not expected exploded into human history. Human history is a story of tombs that are rolled shut and do not open. But we know the story of Christ is a story of death and then of an open tomb. And what does that mean for us? that we gather on this evening not pretending that we don't know where this story goes, but precisely because we know where this story goes. And in the waters of baptism, we have been bound to Christ and bound to the story of Christ in a way that gives us hope of moving through death to life unexpected as well. So as you move through these great 3 days, be mindful of God's truth about life and love. Be mindful that this story of Christ is your story also. And celebrate that love and life as you see it and know it. Amen.